not mistaken, in the series. There's a couple more planned for this year. But each time it gets better, man. It gets more involved, it gets more intense because it's deeper than skin. We move past the superficial barriers and we tackle some real issues in a very short span of time. And I'm very grateful and very fortunate to be able to just ask you guys, how are you doing, man? So first of all, thank you very much for availing of your time. I know as mothers, and then as working mothers, and then as professionals in your various fields, specializing in the things that you specialize, your time is most probably your most precious commodity. And it's something we do not take lightly. So I just want to thank you very much for availing of yourself, for sacrificing time with your minions, like I call my kids, because they're not kids anymore, they're just minions. So thank you very much for that. So I just want to make sure I'm getting this right. Each of you have 2 kids. Is that correct? You've got 3 kids. I can see who's the overachiever on the couch. Huh? That's already started. Your husband is like,
I wanted 4, but he didn't want to buy a new car.
You didn't want to, I just want to walk over to the man and shake his hand. Well done, well done. Incredible level of negotiation skills. I have yet to learn that. Please teach me someday. So 4 kids, was that the plan? 4 kids. Okay. So Corelia, 4 kids, right? You wanted 4, but you ended up with 3 because your husband knows what to say and when to say it.
He said the back seat is full.
The back, okay. And so tell me about it. Tell me about your kids. What are the age groups? What are the things that identify them as unique, to them? Tell me about them. Share a little bit.
Thanks so much. So my eldest now, the one that while I'm sitting on the couch here, with regards to autism, he's now turning 20 this year. 20, yes,
Wow.
20. Then I've got a second son, Carl. So the oldest is Ruben. Then Carl is turning 14.
Wow.
And then we've got the youngest, the head girl of the house. She's now, she's turning 11 this year. Yes, so it's so beautiful when you said the unique, special, new love. Because when you said that, I realized that is exactly what happened with our eldest when we realized that he's autistic, is that you have to shift your perspective and expectations of this child. You have to shift to a unique new love. So he's the one that was diagnosed as autistic at the age of 3. We did a lot of intervention with him in the early years. So by 6, he lost his diagnosis.
Okay.
But what we have realized with this journey is that you never, it is not I think everyone struggles with some of the issues that there is on the autistic spectrum, whether it's just someone is sensory, someone struggles with loud sound, someone struggles with bright lights, someone struggles with being on the beach with the sand, sensory issues. And, they said everyone, how do they say, everyone is normal until you get to know them.
Absolutely. Thank you so much. You've got a kid that's in their 20s. You've got a kid that's in their 20s. So anyway, I'm having a bit of cognitive dissonance here because I'm just like, I'm struggling to reconcile those.
I started when I was 16. No, I'm like,
Again, your husband's fault, eh? Your husband's fault.
it's not.
It's your husband's fault. We need to have a conversation after this one. I appreciate that. So when he was diagnosed, right, you went through this process. There's obviously expectations around having a child. There's certain emotions that everybody goes through, yourself, the family, the extended family, people you see down the street, you walk in like, oh, you're pregnant, all that stuff. How did that paradigm shift when he was diagnosed? Was there a moment of relief? were you battling before and it wasn't identified? Just talk us through some of that period.
Okay, so that period in our lives was quite turbulent. And if you don't mind me just taking a step back, because
Absolutely.
I don't mind. I just love Kelly saying that you have to be vulnerable. And this is also a bit of my own story. So when I got pregnant with Ruben, when he was born, I had very serious postnatal depression. And I struggled with a full year. We were in the UK at that stage. And then when he was a year old, we moved back. And I was on medication then for the depression. But with a move, we didn't realize the effect it would have. So when we came back to South Africa, he was a year old. My depression actually came back and I was hospitalized twice. So I would say for the first almost year and a half of Ruben's life, I was sick. So obviously he was a healthy baby, but I think if in a way I could have been, if I was healthy, I would have perhaps picked up his lack of making sounds, his lack of also because it's your first child, you also don't know really everything you should be looking out for. So by the age of 18 months, he started walking late. So we knew that was late, but he was also not starting to talk. And then we realized that his development is falling behind. And by the age of around 2, so it's interesting how God works. I didn't want to go back to work when I had my son. But then when we were back in South Africa, but then a friend got me an interview at a company, at an engineering company, and I managed to get the job. And I was so torn in two about taking this job because I love my son. I want to be home with my son in any case. So I took the job, and it was actually through the job that I had it brought me healing in the sense that I had something else to focus on. And it gave us the financial means to also be able to all the expenses that goes with special needs children, to be able to do all the speech therapy, occupational therapy, to do all the therapy we had then for the next 4 years in his life,
Right.
to be able to do that. So often we think what we know, like I would at that stage, I was a mom should be at home with a child, but I was taken out of my home situation in a high functioning, I was traveling a lot. And God actually used that to bring healing.
Right.
So God works in other ways than we think. Sorry, what was the question? Yeah, so you asked what was the period like when we got the diagnosis. I think
Yes.
it was a big relief because of all the there was a lot of symptoms when you're a new mom, and obviously the child should behave, and the child should behave in a certain way, but now he's having a meltdown because of his sensory issues, and your first knee-jerk reaction is the child is naughty because he doesn't listen to you when you talk. And then after a while, you realize that this child is actually having a meltdown. And then that whole journey that comes with that of being able to recognize that what the symptoms, what you are seeing is not your parenting. It is the struggle that the child has. And you have to change your whole perspective about where the child is, what is the child experiencing. So when we got a lady in to assess our child for the therapy, she said to me, he was about 2.5 then, she said to me, imagine if you were going throughout your day and 80% of what you try to do, you are not successful. The frustration levels that you have and the negative feedback that you have about yourself. So this is what this child experienced because they go throughout their day and they're not successful. They get into a room, the lights are too bright, so much sensory stuff. They struggle to concentrate on anything that you're asking them to do. They can't pick up the spoon. They can't, they don't have the capacity to feed themselves or to do it like someone else of their age is doing,
Right.
and to have that negative feedback. So I think once we started with a therapy, we started with a speech therapy, and we knew there was something that we can actually do now. That was a big relief, but it was also a sense of loss, because as I said, you have this child and you have these dreams for your child, and now you have to sort of lay all of that in, and that is that new love, unique new love that you have to
Right.
develop for this child.
Samantha, this one's for you. Thank you, Corelia. Samantha, this one is for you. Corelia mentioned reaching the diagnosis at age 3, but kind of was suspecting it prior to that. Because of your relationship with my sister, your journey was slightly different. Talk us through that journey. But before you do that, introduce us to your kids. Tell us about them. Tell them who they are, who are these characters that you have brought into the world.
So I'm sure you've heard Noah. He's just outside at the moment, I think. He does have a lot of sensory stimulation that sometimes is a bit overwhelming for him. And then we like to just sort of not make him hot, take him to a familiar place, and often that settles them quite nicely. And then the beautiful little girl that's up and down, she might come and sit on your lap or give you a hug or ask you for something. That's Hannah. And she has also been such a blessing to our family. I think if I can just start at the beginning, my husband and I, I was 27 and he was 26 when we found out that we were pregnant with Noah. And I think I was the most excited because we had literally planned this. Like, this is what we wanted. This is what we asked God for. I graduated as a medical doctor in 2014. We sort of had our lives essentially planned. Got married at the end of 2014. I did my internship in Kimberley, which I was very grateful for that my husband could join me for. So he was also in Kimberley with me for 2 years. And then, and Hannah's back, for 2 years. And then we found out that we were pregnant in my community service. We were already back in Cape Town, and it was, she's handing you things. It was really such a time of expectation and excitement. And my parents were going to be grandparents for the first time, and Blaine's parents were going to be grandparents for the first time. It was really what a time to be alive moment for us. And when we went for blood tests, and obviously being a medical doctor and having to be faced with these things in a pregnancy that you expected to go as you had planned, sort of the rest of your life, it was hard. It was so hard. We actually initially sort of had a screen, and they were saying, look, baby has these kinds of features, and it might be in keeping with Down syndrome. And the lady who did the scan had a very hard conversation with us. Okay. She said, if it is Down syndrome and he has all of these heart issues, you might want to consider termination of pregnancy. Like, when I heard those words and knowing who God is and where I found myself being a daughter of God, having to even think, even have the idea in your mind that this person growing inside you, that you would have to be the person responsible for making that decision, was absolutely heartbreaking. And we did a few additional tests, which then came back negative. So we had an amniocentesis. They stick a needle into your belly, they draw some fluid, they do some testing on it, and it came back negative. And then sort of we were reassured in a sense, because tests came back negative. Yes, he does have some heart issues, but that we were hoping that would sort of get better as time went on, and he would be healthy anyway. And when Noah was born, like, we were hit with a cascade of different things. And being new, young parents who didn't expect these things to be happening was life-changing, in essence. It really was. And he was in ICU in the beginning, thank you very much, for 22 days. So new mom, I was in community service, so it was another transition with work. We'd been married for 3 years. So I mean, it's not sort of like settled in your marriage and you're still sort of finding things out about one another and how to do things. And here we now had to face this newness in our life. A baby, a baby who had lots of different challenges. We couldn't put a name to it because they had done sort of multiple tests to see sort of what was going on genetically. All came back negative. So there was this big question mark in the beginning. Like, what is it? We don't know. Is it something that we are responsible for as parents? Like, did we contribute to this? We had so many questions in the beginning, and it was hard. Like, hard doesn't even begin to describe what it was, but it was really hard. And I think that God was there every single step of the way. It didn't feel like that in the beginning. And even now we go through periods where there's sort of a new thing, or now we have to address this. And yes, he's been through heart surgery, but there's a possibility that he might have to go for spinal surgery. And again, like, even though we've worked through those emotions, even though we've worked through those thoughts, even though we've come to a point where we absolutely lavish and love Noah in everything that he is, but still we are faced with ongoing challenges and differences. And it's learning to navigate and walk through that. And you absolutely described it correctly, like a unique new love is what we need, but we don't realize that that's what God pours out on us every single day and fills us up with, so that we can pick up our cross and do the things that we have to do for our children every single day. So it was hectic. I don't even have the words to describe just how the beginning was. And I think that when I was pregnant with Hannah, coming back to sort of my children and describing them, it was, again, I was addressed with, is there a possibility that this thing could repeat itself? Like, are we at the same point where, should I be excited about this pregnancy? Are we going to continue with this pregnancy? Should there be anything wrong? And it was crazy. But she has been such a blessing, such a wonderful addition to the family. And the way that she loves and nurtures Noah without us even having to show her or tell her has been one of the most beautiful things that I've experienced as a mom, having sort of the contrast of a child, which I'm sure that both of you can attest to, having a child who does have additional needs or additional things that need to be done for them, versus having a child who's completely independent and on their own and able to do things. But I think that I've grown the most and I've learned the most about God during that time. Before that, I really felt like my life was relatively smooth sailing, let's say. Like, everything that I had set out to do, I felt like I could achieve and I could work hard at it, and I knew where I was going and my mind was focused. And here I was introduced to this new thing that I had absolutely no knowledge about. As a medical doctor, as a mom, as a human being, I had no experience, no knowledge, no nothing. And I think that that's where release came in for me. Like, every single day, there are things that we are going to be faced with that we have no control of. But we have to know and trust that the God that loves us so deeply and so unconditionally, that he's got it covered, that he's got it sorted, and there were days where I was like, I literally just have to get through the next hour. Because if I think any further than the next hour, I think I'm just about going to explode. Because I think the type of emotions that you have to process, not your own thoughts only, but the thoughts of others asking you questions like, what's going on? And is he okay? And I felt a lot of shame and a lot of frustration in the beginning, because I didn't have any answers. The doctors didn't have any answers. We didn't know what the diagnosis was. And here I am, a professional, a mom who expected my life to look different. And now I have to answer all of these questions when I don't have them myself. I'm asking exactly the same questions that you're asking. And I was ashamed because I thought, was it me? Like, and just how you said, I think as moms, we put so much pressure on ourselves to have all the answers and have things laid out in our life and in our hearts and in our mind. And of course, it's good to have goals and a destination that you would love to reach and a journey that you are walking. But we don't realize just how little control we necessarily have over those things. And that's okay. The moment I think I really let go and God have his way in my life, I felt so much freedom and peace because I realized I didn't have to answer these questions. I didn't have to know what to do next or what decisions I had to make next. All I knew is that I had to trust the God that has put me in this place because he knows me, because he loves me, because he's prepared a way for me, because he's made provision for me. And I had to trust in those things above what I felt and what I see. Because when you look at a sick child that you don't understand, that's in hospital every 2 months, that you have to, like you've exhausted all your leave at work, like you end in a place where you just don't know. You don't know where to go. You don't know how to move forward. And as soon as I let go and absolutely let God take control of the situation, I grew. Noah changed. Our family was strengthened. So many things happened just because I took myself out of the equation and didn't give myself so much responsibility in terms of knowledge and knowing what to do and when to do it.
Right.
Sorry, that was a mouthful, actually.
That's okay. That's okay. We here to share. Guys, I told you, no, ek het vir julle gesê. Ek het vir julle gesê, get the big one. Get the big one. Thank you very much, Samantha. Thank you for your vulnerability. Johnlyn, this one is for you. Again, the same. Please introduce your family, your kids and your husband and everyone. How important is a faith-based community during this entire process? You know, what role does a faith-based community play? And do we really understand like what that means in a 21st century society?
Thank you. I'm just looking at Megan. If you can just time me 5 minutes and just wave. My name is Johnlyn. I'm very honored to have my mom here. And my husband's actually preaching out. Would have loved to be here as well. And the little one is actually with a fever this afternoon. So I'm seeing a trend here that all our professions are incredibly based on precision and accuracy, but God. And so I'm also seeing that I'm the odd one out in that my story comes with my youngest, and you both have your oldest. So Zachariah is a high-functioning poster child for everything that you'd ever hope for in your child. So respectful. People are like, yeah, you raised him well. I'm like, I wonder who raised him. Because Zach is fit, no issues except sinusitis, but I blame their dad for everything that's wrong with him. And so Zachariah, there was never a thing, right? When he was born, it was like the second coming of Christ. Almal was by the hospital, and it was like a revolving door, and it was amazing. Next Sunday, the 26th of March, will be 3 years since Micaiah was born, and 3 years since we started hard lockdown. So with Micaiah's birth, no one was allowed in. Not even my husband and I could see our child at the same time. And so, yeah, we're not very obedient. The question is, introduce very, very quickly. So Micaiah was, I had a good pregnancy. Everything was spot on, hot, everything was great. And then I'm going to laugh a lot because that's how I cope a lot of times. But I was watching Netflix, and then I had cramps, and then the water just started to flow. And my mother was with us because it's almost time. En ek gaan na my ma toe en ek sê vir my, "Mami, as 'n mens nou geboorte gee, tweede kind." But the first child was induced labor. So everything was easy, epidural. I was like, "Oh, was there a contraction?" Okay. It was loads of fun, right? It was like being a Grand Prix, but not really. So with this one, I was like, "Mommy, hoe voel 'n mens as 'n mens se water breek?" Sy sê vir my, hoe voel jy nou? Ek sê, daar sê baie water. She's like, okay, jy moet wag, until it becomes more regulated, etc. I'm like, okay, chill. Sit ek, wat het ek daar neergesit? Komperse en handdoeke en alles. And I just continued with Netflix. And so my mother came back in again. And she's like, jou tweede broer het 'n groot kop gehad. Jy wil nie 'n droë geboorte hê nie, my kind. Toe gaan lieweste hospitaal toe. Gerald knows sy tweede broer. Ek moet nie vir hom sê nie, hy sal my skel. Gaan hospitaal toe. And we went, and the midwife was like, I don't see anything happening tonight. You guys are 7 minutes away from the hospital. If you'd like to stay, you can stay. Your husband can go if you want to. And I reckon, this is Zach's last night as the only child. Just prepare this brother for the other one that's going to come. It's fine. And I'm laying there, and suddenly there was just a churning in my tummy, which was very abnormal. And I threw up. I came back. And in between that period of time, the midwife, the staff had changed, the night staff. And I buzzed because I was feeling all kinds of horrible. And the nurse is like, "May see him, don't stoot." I'm like, epidural? Like, there's no time for that. Just push. And I pushed and gave birth without my husband there, without the gynae there. They actually arrived together after the fact. And everything from that moment was kind of a blur. Micaiah was taken away. He was brought back. And the pediatrician, attending pediatrician, came to us. And she looked at us and she said, "Your child looks funny." Things not to say. And what happened after that was doctor after doctor saying, this boy can go into cardiac arrest at any moment because there are 4 chambers in the heart. And I couldn't explain till this day correctly because I couldn't hear anything. It was just a lot of noise. But basically, if this section, the walls were down, if this section goes to that section, he can go into cardiac arrest. Then there was a concern about his rectum not being aligned properly. But essentially what the pediatrician was trying to say was that this boy has Down syndrome. So keep in mind that I've had a perfect pregnancy. Nothing was picked up. So this was complete shock to us. Church was shut. We are pastors in our church. So who do you draw strength from? And I think if I can just summarize everything, my true relationship with the Holy Spirit was questioned. As a person, you ask yourself, what did I do? It's like a fundamental question that a child asks. If I am being disciplined, what did I do to earn this? And now journeying this child is a regeerhuis, né? And so many funny stories about Micaiah. His teacher sitting there, he glues children's arms. Micaiah wakes up every day. He is like the alarm clock you wish you had. And he says, "Hi, Daddy." Say, "Pa, wil jy eers vir my hallo sê?" He's like, let Micaiah say hello. And then he goes, "Hello, Mommy." "Hi, Zach." Every day. And what he has taught me, and a lot of people, we've grown up with, that obladi, oblada, that type of, and you think, that child is a Down syndrome child, they're just always happy. But could this be God's way of telling us that you have absolutely no reason not to start the day with joy? And so every time I want to get into a funk, I look at him. 4 months in, and I didn't say this, he had multiple holes in his heart. And one morning, just before we visited the cardiologist, my husband woke me up. If you know him, this is his way. He says, "Oi." Not even my darling. "I just want to let you know that every hole is closed, but you'll hear tomorrow." And I'm like, okay. I sleep. And again, all the doctor's visits, only one of us could be there. And go to the cardiologist 4 months in. And the cardiologist says, he's over 60 years old. "I've never seen such a thing. There's not a hole in his heart. I can see your son again when he's 65 years old." Our prayers became so focused on the finished work of Christ. We saw the healing before the healing happened. But I'll also say this, when you've got seed in the ground, it's not obnoxious. You've got to recall what you've labored in the kingdom. And I started praying prayers of remembrance. I said, Lord, you know me since I was 14 when I was serving you. And I'm coming to cash in right now. And that was the object of our prayer. And we still pray. We pray. He's running, but he requires therapy. And he's speaking, but he requires therapy. But he's not communicating. And so all these wins are wins for us. And we see him, the dreams that we have for him, we pray into, because it might not look like the dreams we had, but what better dream than God's dream for him? And that's the alignment for us. Amen.
Did you wave? Did you wave now? Oh, no, you mustn't wave. Thank you so much, Johnlyn. You touched on so many critical things. You touched on, the expectation and being supported by your family, and then you have this church community, and then it feels like it all falls to nothing, and then you cash in with God, and now it's like the comeback of the century, And for me, right at the end, you mentioned communication. I feel fundamentally communication is one of those things that we as people we're just terrible at. We want everybody to read our mind. More so if you have a child that has got very special needs. How has a two-part question, and this is for everybody, a two-part question, how has your communication within your marriage changed since you've had your child, since you've had your children, right? And also, how does your communication look like on a daily basis with your kids? Because it's different. Corelia, I'll give it to you first, and then we can work our way back.
How long do you want me to talk? Okay, so my husband is sitting there, and I see he's got a slight smile on his face. So communication with special needs children in the marriage, obviously it brings a lot of pressure into the marriage. And to be honest, as a young mum of a special needs child, I focused all my energy on my child. And it's so easy for that to happen, and then your husband becomes sort of a byproduct, because you are so focused on getting this child, giving him the best that he needs to be. Obviously, at that stage, I was still healing from my depression. I was in a job that was requiring quite a lot of myself. He as well. We're both in the engineering field at that stage. He's also engineer. So at that stage, it was both of us, long hours. You have a special needs child. So it's just like being a little mouse on the treadmill or on the wheel and just running. And so I think it's very easy. And obviously, we were in the autistic community at that stage, and we also saw marriages breaking up because of this issue. And I think if it wasn't for a couple in our church at that stage who came to a cell group where we were one evening, and they sort of saw the interaction between me and Barbara, and I think they realized this couple needs help. And so they started counseling. Interestingly, not with my husband, but with me. So I think the Bible says that God makes everything beautiful in its own time.
Yeah.
And our minister also said once that nothing is wasted in God's economy. So it's just beautiful for me how God takes the difficult circumstances and He creates. Out of that, He can create anything. So out of what I see in this whole situation with my son, and then the difficulties we had at that stage in our marriage, because obviously you don't realize you're in a difficult space. Until then you realize you are in a difficult space. So is that through the ministry of this couple, a lot of things in my life was addressed. So through the situation with Ruben, his autism, I got healing, not only from my depression physically, but also from, and it was over a period of 10 years that this happened. It wasn't immediately, but also I could address issues in my life that would perhaps have been latent my whole life if it wasn't brought to life during this couple's intervention in our lives as well. So, what was the question?
You are answering the question. You are answering it.
So, Madhu, do you want to add anything about communication? I think
The only thing I think about is, hulle moet mal wees. You know, it was so difficult getting to where we are now. Ek soek nie meer dit nie. Ek het baie te werk om dit te kom. Ek soek nie meer daai nonsens nie.
Yeah, I just want to add one thing that made a huge difference in our marriage, and I would really recommend it to anyone, is that we did the Hetty Brits tall trees analysis. I don't know if you've ever heard about the book Kwee Kinders met Karakter from Hetty Brits. So we decided to do the tall trees analysis, which is for adults, and which she does leadership. And when that came back, and also the people that did the ministry with also us as couples did our personality test. And when it came back, so obviously, I think all of us are aware you obviously married someone that is your opposite. But in our case, it was like directly opposite.
Okay. Okay.
So when we did all that personality test, we just realized that how we differ. And that in itself gave us so much understanding which we didn't have before, which helped improve that communication between us to the point now where I'm becoming more like him and he's becoming more like me. Like he never used to talk back to me, and now I'm sometimes like, what's it? Yeah, so that's the phenomenon. Yeah, so I think it's just to have understanding for each other, and then also to make space to talk. That is something that we realize as well, is that you have to create space to talk to each other, and you have to state your need, because he's not going to understand my need that I need to talk about something. But I've realized to say to him, listen, I need to talk to you about something. Normally his eyes goes that big, and then he says, okay. Yeah, so yeah, thanks.
Samantha, I actually want to ask you another question. Thank you, Corelia. As a medical professional and as the mother of a special needs child, I want to ask one or two more pragmatic questions now. Do you think the medical fraternal is equipped enough to deal with special needs children? And if they are, fantastic. And if they're not, to what capacity do changes need to be made, and at what level do changes need to be made?
So my absolute honest answer is no. And as a medical professional, so as a doctor, to realize how big the gap is when you have to receive the diagnosis of a child, it blew my mind, because it made me realize just how ill-equipped we are to deal with things where you have to give a diagnosis, but they have so many implications. And the implications are dealt with in a very sort of strategic, medical, therapeutic way, and they don't often look at the whole other part of it, which is often the biggest part of it. So that's the emotional and psychological support that you need, the spiritual support that you need. And I realized the gap, and it made me a little bit angry, because I realized, is this what I do when I am confronted where I have to give diagnosis to people? And if so, that needs to change right now. And how do I change that? Because in terms of that, I'm very practical. So if it's going to make a difference in people's lives, it needs to happen now. Mm-hmm. But I realized that for the rest of the medical fraternity, that's difficult to do. Mm-hmm. It's different diagnoses that need to be made. It's different types of therapy. It's different things that need to be addressed in different orders. So I think for us, I think initially we needed to tackle the medical things first, because he had been so sick. He was in and out of hospital. And when I say every 2 months, I kid you not, for 2.5 years, we were in and out of hospital every 2 months. And we were at least staying there for 2 weeks at a time. And if you're not addressing the rest of the aspects, that can begin to take a toll, like you say, on your marriage. And being a young couple who need to face this, that is so difficult to do if you're not being equipped by the people that are meant to give you guidance in a sense, medically. But then also, and that's I think where we found our strength is in our church community, but also in our family. I think our family has been our biggest support in terms of navigating everything, because there were just times we were like, no words, no direction, no, we literally did not know. And there were times where for instance, and it's really quite practical things, like your leave is exhausted, for instance. So your child is lying in hospital and he's quite ill, he's on a ventilator, but my mom has to be there with him. Or my mother-in-law has to be there with him. Like those were challenging things for me that weren't really addressed by the medical fraternity. It has made me more aware, and it has changed me because I know that these are the actual things that people need. Like, it's great to give a diagnosis and to have an answer, but what now? Like, what are my next steps? How do I move from here? What community do I get plugged into or connected to where we can share these kinds of things? And I realized even now, I mean, there have been kids with special needs for more than hundreds of years. Why is it that still now there is such a lack of support for kids who have additional needs? Are we still ashamed? Is it because we don't want to speak about it? Have we not accepted it or addressed it? Have we not made peace with it? And if those are the kinds of questions that we are asking, what are we then going to do about it? Because we cannot leave it like that. And like I said, I found the biggest freedom when I started to speak about Noah's story, because I realized that people aren't as harsh as I thought they would be. They weren't going to judge me because I was dealing with a child who I didn't understand or that I couldn't communicate with. And even touching communication. So Noah is nonverbal. He doesn't speak, but he communicates. And I think that was the biggest mind shift, the biggest heart shift for me, is that you don't have to communicate verbally. Yes, it's easiest for us because we can use words and we can use language and we understand one another. It's easy and efficient. But everything isn't easy and efficient. The world doesn't always operate like that. So finding other ways of communication is absolutely essential. And I found that because I've understood how to communicate with my son who doesn't speak verbally, I can now interact with other people on a non-verbal level. And really engage with people where I don't only use words, but non-verbal cues as well. So I think it's changed me, but it's made me more passionate about wanting to do something because I've seen and noticed the gap that there is.
Right. Thanks for that. Johnlyn, this one is for you. As someone who engages with large volumes of people almost on a daily basis, either through your ministry or through your work, there's often, from an outsider's perspective, if I see someone who has a special needs kid and they're having a hard time, maybe your kid is throwing a tantrum the way kids do, how do I approach that situation and offer assistance without coming across as condescending, arrogant, things like that? What's your approach?
Difficult one. I want to maybe start out by saying that a lot of times we don't realize that a child is born to a family, but also a family is given to a specific child. And one of the biggest learnings for us was when we saw a counselor after the diagnosis. She said, as much as Micaiah has been given to you, God has also given you to him. Because he will know exactly what type of a parent that child needs, but also why you need this child. So I see a lot, and maybe it's because he's so young, he's 3 years old. But Micaiah doesn't try his luck. something that, well, his teachers here, Michelle, and we were very clear. Micaiah doesn't go to a special needs school. He's at a Montessori school. And what attracted us to that was Montessori focuses on the strengths of a child, and he's a child. Because the world is not filled with kids who have Down syndrome. So we didn't want at the end of his 6th year to him to enter into a world and realize, oh my word, there's other kids. But he's just around, there are some autistic kids in his school, and there are some, I mean, he's the only child with trisomy 21, and I think the first one with trisomy 21. So something that we decided as a couple was we are not making fuss and flace of our children. If he throws a tantrum, take a pack, buddy. We're not going to say, oh, shame, it's because Micaiah. No, he knows, and he knows a look, and he knows a tone. So, John Trump, no, mommy? and mommy and daddy agrees on that, right? And so that was, I love this. Come, girl, take over the world. And so he doesn't try that. But a lot of times, what I know I'm tempted with is, in the store, especially in the store. That's why I try not to take them with. They go on. And the temptation is to act embarrassed. No. Come here, my boy. This is not happening today. Right? And I think it's that when you are embarrassed as a parent for your child, whether it's a normal child, whether it's a child requiring additional needs, if you are embarrassed, that embarrassment falls on your child. So I can't remember that this has happened to us. Maybe it's still coming.
I'm not prophesying. That's not what I'm doing. No.
But I've seen it, etc. When that thing comes or they try their luck, there's a look. I like to call it a tromp look. Jared was in the same class as my sister, so I don't know if you got the tromp look from Sharon.
I did.
But there's a look, and you'll know. Nope. So I think just in terms of that discipline, whatever, at home, these things happen, and sometimes it's so cute though. And then I'm like, let them go on. Mommy, in different iterations, and I let it go sometimes. But essentially, as you're asking this, I do feel that one of the first thoughts, and I didn't share this initially, that I was confronted with, I was with Micaiah in the neonatal ICU. I was holding him, but I couldn't hold him properly because I was so aware of the fact that I could lose you at any time. So my mind said, don't bond. Don't get too close or comfortable because you might have to say goodbye to this child. And as I was singing over Micaiah and just worshiping over him, the Holy Spirit whispered and said, there's no other child coming. This is your child. Hold him properly. And I held him closer. And Micaiah sings Dick False, guys. But this boy, you get choir singers, but they're not worshippers. And now this one is a worshiper. He hears this, just a note, and he just starts, and he goes. And I know when the switch happens for him. So it's very important, like what you declare over your children before they're born. Before they're born, yeah.
Thank you so much. Ik heb nou genoeg gepraat. So I just want to turn it and open it up to the floor. If you have any questions, this is our Q&A slot. If you have any questions for any one of the people on the couch, now is the Gerald een steek met zijn hand. Ik zie voor jou, broeder. Ik zie voor jou.
My question relates to what you, Sammy and Johnlyn just said. So you've had to learn to communicate, and now for me, I'm not sure how do I communicate, and how am I allowed to communicate, and what's the right thing to do? Because I know that you guys are dealing with this all the time. I'm only dealing with it right now, but I'm not sure how to. And so, if you were to empower me, what would 3 things be that can assist me to assist you, or just to join hands with you in that moment where I don't really know how to communicate. I don't know the question.
I think questions like that make me very excited because I think my biggest thought is that I want people to be engaged and involved with things that doesn't necessarily directly affect them. Because how often is it that we only make things a priority that we think directly involve us or affect us? And so when I hear things like that, I'm like, yes, ask me these questions because these are crucial, important questions. I think with regards to communicating with kids that have additional needs, especially when there may be a sensory element involved, I think asking the parent is always a good idea. Are there any sort of do's and don'ts? Is there things that they like, that they can tolerate, or that they don't? Because I think that will give you grounds for how you are able to engage. Sort of, so if it's like bright lights or loud sounds or very rough textures, then you holding their hand or touching their skin won't bother them too much, because there are some children who have sensory issues that love physical touch. And Noah is one of them. Like, he used to be sort of very averse to certain textures, but now he wants to engage with you, and he'll encourage you to engage with him as well. So I think maybe finding out from the parent, if you're meeting a child who has additional needs or a different kind of need in the beginning, I think chatting to the parent, even if it's just for a few moments, to find out the do's and don'ts. And I think, me personally, it's the best thing, it's the most wonderful thing when I see people engage with Noah normally. You don't tailor how you treat him. You treat him as though you would any other child that's running around. And I think initially for me, that was something that I really had to overcome, because I would see other children running around and I would be like, Noah's not able to do that yet. How do I feel joy about other children engaging with my child if I can't even feel that when I look at him? And so that's something that I definitely had to overcome. But it's the most wonderful things when I see people engage with Noah as though he's absolutely fine, normal. There's nothing going on. And he receives that when you speak to him as though you would any child. If you hold him, if you pick him up, he's very heavy, just be warned. If you pick him up, he loves that kind of affection and engagement. And so I think that approaching them in that way, they can feel it. Not to be scared or apprehensive or act weirdly. There's really nothing different or strange about them. It's just that there are certain things that they will receive well in terms of their communication, and other things that they may not. So I would say engage with a parent and then play with them. Treat them as though you would any other child. Yeah. I don't know if you want to add to that.
I think 100%. Micaiah is, I think, the spirit of discernment. So he'll hug some people, but then he'll go, no. So you can try. And I don't force him onto people. Like, if he has one of those days where he doesn't, I don't force him, go kiss their auntie, ons was geforceer. But I don't do that because he's still learning to speak. If he feels anything inappropriate, would he be able to say no? So I think with that, just like Sam says, children love to play, and that's their love language for now. And Micaiah likes to high five and fist pump, and he likes hugging. Sometimes the kids don't like hugging back. But if he's having a good day, then he feels free hugs for all. But I also say this, as each child is different, each child with additional needs is different. I sometimes think we heighten the sense of, treating differently. But children fundamentally are children. And I think the more we warm ourselves up to that, the more we realize that, it's universal, the type of love and attention that they want.
Any other questions?
I think to all three of the ladies, and it's based on the issue of diagnosis, and particularly when we look at our educational system. In your experience, when the child is diagnosed and you have a sense of what is wrong, would you recommend inclusion or special needs?
I have got a lot to say on the subject. having had a child go through. So our initial knee-jerk reaction was with our oldest, because he was diagnosed as high functioning, was like, great, we can do everything we can, and then we eventually put him in a mainstream school, and then, you know, it's done and dusted. And it doesn't turn, it's not like, it doesn't work that way. Because although they lose the diagnosis, they always still have something like ADD, or that they're not diagnosed as autistic anymore, but it's very rare that they lose all the sensitivities that they have. So we decided when our second son was born, when he was sort of 6, he sort of also started to also present with a little bit of learning difficulties. We kept an eye on him from the day that he was born. And then we also did some intervention with him the year he went to school, some OT. And then they said, in his second, when he was grade 2, they said, oh, why don't you send him to this special school? It's just 5,000 Rand a month. You know, it's like, no, they didn't say that. But, you know, they said that we should think about taking him out of mainstream school. It's the second son. And by this time, with our experience with our eldest, and it's not only, the issue with him was not really academically, it is because these children also struggle emotionally in the mainstream schools, because not everyone, but all the children in his year that we knew of, and I mean the children know immediately who are the children that is not, you know, like them. So there were about 3 of them in his age group, and they stood out like sore thumbs. And so when he was grade 8, and our second one was grade 2, so we decided to take a little sabbatical for 6 months. So we decided to take our children out of school, and then when we were finished with the sabbatical, we decided to homeschool the children. And I am not one that is against the school system for just being against the school system's sake, but I don't think CAPS is the right curriculum for a special needs child, because CAPS puts too much pressure on the children with the amount of work that it requires of the children. So when we took the children out of the school system and we started to homeschool, my grade 2, that was constantly compared to other little boys his age in terms of his ability to be able to read, we took that pressure off him, that constant comparison to other children, and the constant feedback, I'm not as good as that child, I'm not working as quickly as that child, you know, and that was what my eldest experienced for the whole duration of his schooling career until he was grade 8. So we decided, let's take that pressure off the children, and the whole homeschooling, how can I say, there's different ways of thinking about homeschooling, but one of them is that you give the child enough space to find their own rhythm in learning. So you don't have to pressure them into be able to read at 9. You know, if your child prefers to listen to stories, research has shown that if you take a 12-year-old boy and you expose him to 6 months of learning to read, where you have pressured a 6-year-old boy to be able to read, the 12-year-old reads in the 6 months just as well as the 6-year-old that's been pressured to read for 6 years. Okay, so it's all about the neurological, how can I say, development of a child, where I think that the schooling system doesn't cater for that for special needs children. You need to see, where is my child neurologically? How can I support him to learn the best where he is? And then I would say the biggest thing we can do for our children is to take pressure off them when it comes to their academic ability. Meet them in the place where they are at and give them what they need. So I just want to say again, I'm not against CAPS, I'm not against the schooling system, but I think when you have a special needs child, just think twice about it.
I think just to add in that, I love the idea of inclusion. I really do. I think it's good because children children who are so-called normal need to learn how to engage with children who are a little bit different. And I want to see a world where that happens naturally. But I understand in the schooling system that can be very difficult, especially in the government setting. I think that schools are very ill-equipped to deal with children who have learning abilities that are adaptive, that need to be changed a little bit. And I think that teachers are royally overwhelmed in the schooling system to be able to deal with children who are learning at a sort of a relatively the same level and those who aren't. So again, I want to see a world where we would include certain kids into an integrated system. But I realize that all children who have different learning abilities, they need a specialized setting at some or other stage, whether that is at a special needs school or a school that provides additional assistance, or whether that is at a school that has an integrated system. I think finding the right fit for your child is actually what the most important thing is.
Sorry, so I just want to add to that. So if you take your child out of the school system, sometimes we all struggle with that thing of, am I now not allowing my child to receive an education? So just in our situation, when we took the pressure off both the boys, especially our eldest son, when he was 14, turning 15, when he started homeschooling, he finished his American GED at the age of 19 and a half, but only because he was for a year not in school, 6 months delay. 18 and a half, yeah. Did I say 18 and a half? Sorry, yes. And, I just often think back about where he is now, that when he was 6 years old, how he managed his GED, I could have only prayed and hoped for. Best case scenario. Because from age 16, we just provided him with all the learning material. He worked on his own. When he was 18, he started to work on his own through all the GED material. He asked us to book his test for him. He prepared his test by his own. He went to write on his own. So where your child is as age 6 it's not the final diagnosis. I just want to say there can happen so much, but it won't happen without intervention. You have to have the intervention and the therapy and everything with that for them to be able to be successful at a later stage. So yeah, thanks.
Another question. I see her hand. My mother gave me a look now. So
Thanks, Janet. So I just want to say, we had Jared and Kelly, and we thought we were very good, boy and a girl, and we were done. And then we had Ethan and Brent. We had twins very soon after Kelly, and I think that's why Kelly is so strong-willed and do things on her own, because she just had to survive on her own. But just talking about the schooling system. Ethan and Brent are both dyslexic. So that wasn't detected at school. It's only when I realized when they were in preschool that the teacher they had at the time wasn't picking up anything, because I had suspected something and asked them to be transferred into another teacher's class. And like within 2 weeks, she detected that they actually had a problem. And then we started with assessments and going to OT, because they also had low muscle tone. So I think, the school system is really, unless you as a parent are aware and know your child, the support is very minimal. I mean, on high school, I had to initiate going to the teachers and say, like, can we arrange something for them, because they were in the normal Model C school. And then we got additional time for them to write exams and that, and they wrote the exams in a normal Model C school with additional time. But what I do want to say is, Ethan and Brent brought a lot of challenges in terms of sacrifices that we had to make. But I can tell you now, we as a family were blessed beyond measure, because if we didn't have Ethan and Brent, we probably would have been a selfish family in terms of, just thinking, we can just get everything. But there were so many challenges, and Ethan and Brent just brings a different atmosphere, or because they struggle so much at school. So we were really blessed to have them. I just also want to say that, do you find at times that maybe you could have done a bit more? Because I sometimes feel I could have done a bit more to help.
Yeah, I think that I have moments, just sobering moments, where I stop what I'm doing. And where I realize that if I just take some time out and just be present, I think what happened with me was just after COVID, the company that I was working for, they were transitioning, and I just wasn't up for this transition. And God had really told me that whatever I need to birth in you, I will provide for you. But you need to take this step of obedience out. And I left the company that I was at. My husband is self-employed. We both in full-time ministry as well. And it was as deep as was here, like these needs come with bills, right? And you can't shy away from that. And a 9 to 5 would not be able to capacitate the financial need, at least for me. And so I stepped out in faith a year ago exactly on the 1st of March, and just kept on going. And then I told my husband last week, do you realize that in the first 2 months of this year, I've made my full salary for a year? And whatever the requirements are, God has given us. Genesis says, I will give you the power to create wealth. Not your abilities, not your skills, not your qualifications. Those things come to naught when it comes to your children. Because essentially, the emotional availability and the physical strength you need to maneuver the ebbs and flows of the children, and to also realize that your husband was there before they were there. I always tell my children, "Julle tweede." My husband was there first. I love what you said about creating space. At the end of every day, if the children would have us sleep early, we have a room and we have space where I was today. Today was chunk, just being real. And having those conversations every single day. And then finding that space in the room in the day to look at your children and to appreciate those moments. Sometimes I feel imbalanced. I feel like I've been in this office too long. And I have, 2 little ones knocking on the door. And I have to say, you have to wait. But I've also had to admittedly get rid of mommy guilt. Because I am not, and please hear me when I say this, I'm not just a mother. I am many things. And that is a very important part of my life, but it's not the only part of my life. And so I think a lot of times we fall into the trap of feeling guilty for doing something for ourselves, for pursuing the dreams that God has also given us. Because essentially you're building a legacy here, and they benefit from it. But as to your question, could I have done more? I think we can always do more, but I think we're doing the best with what we have right now. Yeah.
I just want to add to that. I think that we always feel like we can do more. And that goes for any parent. It's not only parents who have children with additional needs. But I've also reached a point with Noah where I had to decide, okay, what are the most important things and what's going to change? Because I realized I can be doing more OT and more physio, and we can go to the best speech therapist to try and get him to say words. But is that going to improve his quality of life is the question I needed to ask myself. And is it going to improve our quality of life? Because the way that he communicates, of course we want him to walk, and I trust in Jesus' name that he will walk. but is investing time now in terms of, and he gets physiotherapy on a weekly basis, but should he be getting physiotherapy twice a week? Should we be looking at other modalities to get him mobile? Will be at our expense in terms of our time, in terms of mine and Blaine's time together as husband and wife, in terms of our ability to spend time with our family. And is that worth it, is the question. I want Noah to live in a world where people will not only want to care about him because they feel sorry for him, but more from a perspective that they want the world to be better, and to make the world better, we must love each other. And how much more is that reflecting what Jesus did for us? It really is about loving one another. And when I think about, is he loved? Of course he is. Does he feel that every day? I mean, he can't communicate that to me, but when I look at him, I can feel that he feels that he is loved. And yes, of course, those developmental milestones are important, and we will do the best that we can to get him there. But if he doesn't get there, does that mean that I failed because I didn't have physiotherapy twice a week, or that he didn't go to OT more? And I think that those are the questions you need to have peace in your heart and your mind with God, knowing that he's going to be and get exactly where he needs to get based on what God is doing, not based on what I am able to do, or what physiotherapists are able to do, or what medical technology is able to do. And yes, we will do everything in our power, but we must realize there is only so much that we can control.
I'm just going to a close. If you ladies would want to share, I mean, with the audience and, everyone, because for me, I realized that the importance of community with regards to special needs, and I think maybe we should change the narrative. And I think that's why you ladies are here, is to change the narrative of special needs children. And I mean, within my profession, I've seen the compliance aspect of it that has not been, and I get so, perturbed, I'm not going to say angry, but I mean that we can do better in terms of the facilities, the way a restaurant looks, how houses are designed and all of those things. But expanding the community, because I really feel that's what On the Couch is. At every On the Couch, we expand our community, we meet new people. And if there is something that, God has really placed in your heart just to share with this new community, just with the last words from all of the ladies, what would that be? Corelia, we can start, and then Sammy and Johnlyn.
They both are saying. So Kelly knows this. She's sort of a big part of it. But I initially, when Noah was diagnosed and was better and had his heart surgery, I realized, man, there is such a gap in the special needs community with regards to facilities and education, and even just the knowledge of how many kids are living in South Africa who have learning disabilities, who have physical disabilities. There are no statistics whatsoever with regards to that. So we don't actually know how big the problem is. And I started a non-profit company, even though I've not done much with it yet, but it is in the planning phase. And we want to answer questions like, how big is the problem? What are the needs? And how are we going to address them? And I feel like if one person, even with one problem that you can identify in the space that you are, whether it's home or work or your church community, if you can just look at those three questions and try and strategize to try and problem solve, I think that it'll make the world, and I know it sounds like pie in the sky, the world is a better place, peace, and we love one another. But I really think that if we are going to create change, we need to actually action out what we are saying. So watch this space is all I'm going to say. Watch this.
Okay, so just from our experience, obviously, schooling is for me a big thing for children on the autistic spectrum, whether they are, I would say, sort of on the high functioning side, because a lot of them are in the Model C schools or the mainstream schools, but they really do struggle, some of them more academically, but I think all of them struggle emotionally in their peer group. So that is one thing where I think there needs to be understanding in the broader community of the emotional needs of special needs children, and the fact that they often are emotionally a year or two younger than their peers, and um, and that is difficult in the, how can I say, in the normal schooling system, where you often get children grouping together, and if you don't fit into that specific group, you basically find yourself alone, and I think if there can be more understanding, and I think a lot of TV shows are starting to introduce autistic children and special needs children into the shows to actually show people what it's like. But I think that just the people that don't have special needs children need to understand better what it is for a family to have a special needs child. Because me and one of the other mothers was talking about it. A woman that's, sorry, I'm talking about a woman, but, because moms normally are sort of in charge of the schooling or helping the children with the homework. Dads pay the bills. So, no, but we said to each other that a mother with a neurotypical child that needs to go through the exams, she just makes sure there's food on the table and there's quiet in the house and the child does his thing. But you with a special needs child, you need to work, you need to make sure everything happens that the normal other mother do, and you have to learn with your child, and you have to make sure that they understand it. And so I once read something that said that a mother with an autistic child has the same stress levels than a soldier that's on the battlefront. Okay, so that's obviously, when you're still in the throes of, now you've got the diagnosis, now you have to start. So you've got the same stress levels as a soldier on the battlefront. So we said those mothers that just put the book in front of the children and they learn by that don't have an idea what the pressure is on the mom with a special needs child. So yeah, that's just my 2 cents worth on that.
I think maybe just to veer off a bit, I think just the sense of community that you speak about. I've not raised my child alone. I've not raised either of my children alone. And I think that's the power of, like Sammy mentioned earlier, family and church community. It's really understanding that you can't do any of it alone, and just the power that there is in that, and the trusting in the letting go to that happen, to allow that to happen. And I think just lastly, in closing, I'll remember this for the rest of my life. My husband told me one night, he told me, you know what faith is? Faith is not changing the diagnosis we've received. Faith is changing the result of the diagnosis. And so you said that you received the diagnosis at 3 years old, but he outgrew the diagnosis at 6. Because if you stayed stuck at the diagnosis, you wouldn't have faith for any improvement or development. Same with Noah, the same with Messiah. And I think that's what differentiates us in terms of this platform. God is Kodesh. And I believe that is what God wants for all of us, is to, the one who created us, to put that all just back in his hands again. We can do all of the fancy stuff. I shudder to think how undiagnosed children live. It's like you say, they cast aside as stotekinders. But there's a lot of that. We are middle class. We are able to afford occupational therapy, speech therapy, etc. But for a simple tablet, you have to queue from 7 until 5 in the evening. And so, how much more for a child that is going through life undiagnosed? And I think what sparks us here is to create that awareness, but become more responsible than just the awareness raising. I'm so excited about the platform, and you can count on me to put pressure on you. because I believe that there is so much that needs to come from this. And I want to thank you, Kelly, thank you, Jared, and the Mogul Empire for this platform that's created. Thank you so much.